Join the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented Flight of the Navigator. Watching it with me is Ian Callahan. Hi Ian, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, Rich.
I'll apologise in advance. This is the second time we've recorded this after some massive IT, I suppose, keep on the 80s theme, gremlins. So we're coming back to this again a couple of months after the first go. But Ian, how was watching the film for you again?
It was really good, actually. This was one of the films that was always seemed to be on when I was a kid. Sort of coming from school and sort of catch it on the end of like Channel 5 or sort of like BBC 2 or something like that. It'd probably been about 20 years or so since I'd sort of watched it all the way through. And actually, I thought that it's actually stood up quite well in certain respects.
For a Disney film, this was not one of their sort of higher end releases. It wasn't one of the animated ones or anything like that. But it did seem to sit in that era where, very much in the mid-80s, where a lot of films around space and aliens came out. It was around the time of Space Camp and Howard the Duck and things like that, trying to keep on those Star Wars coattails.
Definitely, yeah. Sort of a bit of a mashup between sort of E.T. and Back to the Future, but just done in really a kiddie-friendly style.
It's strange that it's kind of also an alien abduction as well, and this isn't the standard alien abduction that you expect of a redneck in a bar who's been probed in all sorts of places.
Exactly, it's more like a friendly alien sort of abduction.
It's as you say, touching on going back to E.T. It's very much if E.T. had taken Elliot with him and carried out some experiments, very regular experiments on the kid and dropped him back 8 years later.
Exactly, after having sort of gone on a bit of a road trip as well.
And the premise of this film, for anyone who hasn't seen it, and I strongly suggest you do, essentially a kid falls into a ravine in 1978 Florida, bumps his head, wakes up, and after a couple of little incidents where he goes back to his house and everything, suddenly realises that it's actually 8 years past. So in 1986, when the film came out, sort of slightly skipping ahead, it happens at around the same time that a UFO or alien spaceship just happens to be around the corner. Is this the sort of film you think family friendly when you look at it's almost a bit complicated, isn't it?
A little bit. I think that if you're trying to explain the plot to people and sort of talking to people about the film in the run up to sort of doing the recording, it's that the plot is a bit complicated, sort of trying lots of different offshoots of things happening all over the place with it.
And something that we talk about is what the director has done previously. Now he's got quite a
varied CV. I think's the phrase I would use.
And I suppose some of the films that particular note, it was Randall Kleiser who directed Grease, Blue Lagoon, and the sequels to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, of which I think one was Honey, I Blew Up the Kids.
That's right.
Honey, I Left the Kids in the McDonald's. So a varied background, this guy, but for a film came across very well and managed to throw in, and this must have been the version I had because I don't remember it being on the video, even a few shits thrown in as well. Yeah,
and I think that's sort of a big thing for sort of Disney movies at that particular time. And I think it smacks, because I think that what I was reading was that it was actually Disney had had the script originally, they'd passed on it, and a Norwegian film company had picked it up. They'd gone bust, and then Disney then picked it back up again and completed the film. So, there's a sort of a mild profanity in the film in a couple of places.
And it seems to be a recurring theme of a number of these 80s films that we cover is company goes bust and there's some issues with the budget.
Exactly.
They stretch themselves too far.
Very much a tale of the times.
Film opens, so it's 1978, it's Fort Lauderdale, with a dog frisbee tournament.
Yeah, which is an unusual beginning, and actually I'd forgotten that was the beginning of the film, because, like I said, it's been probably about 20 years or so since I watched the start of it, and I think it's very interesting and very sort of skillfully shot sort of beginning to the beginning of the film. And actually there is an actual World Frisbee Dog Championship, which amused me greatly. I spent a lot of time this morning watching videos on YouTube. The current champion is Torch, who's a McNab breed apparently, and it's an open event, so all you dog owners, feel free to enter it next year.
Yeah, I have a feeling my dog would try and eat the frisbee. But, it worked out well, that, and I suppose it was intended, that the idea that the frisbees would double as flying saucers.
Yeah, so it's sort of a neat tease that. There's like a couple of instances in, like you say, the frisbee at the beginning of the film. There's then an airship which then sort of comes over in that sort of scene when then everyone's like looking up the sky. So you're thinking that, is it this early that it's coming there? But actually it's not. And then I think there's a little bit later on when sort of David's in the forest. There's like a water tower which you get a tiny little glimpse of, and actually, it's a water tower rather than a UFO.
Now, the sort of main boy in this film is David. He's very softly spoken for, you'd assume, the lead character in a film. He sees all these wonderful dogs throwing frisbees around and tries to do the same with his dog. His dog, now, one thing that struck me was it was very much one of these dogs that looked like David Bowie. He had his eyes were two different colours, which was fascinating. But also the dog's name was Bruiser.
And the dog was anything but a bruiser.
And again, I don't know if this was 80s Disney trying to be a bit more street or something like that, but I suppose the current equivalent, if it would be a dog called Killer or Asbo.
Yeah, exactly.
And on the way home, him and he's there with his mum and dad and his brother, who appears to be a young Alan Carr.
Yes, yeah. And just as annoying.
Yeah. He's got the world's thickest glasses on and a bowl haircut and his fat little legs.
It's sort of like classic American, sort of like 7-8-year-old sort of geeky, slightly geeky kid.
And their insults flying at each other like dork, buttface.
Yeah, it's just pure 80s, isn't it? It's Scuzz Bucket, I think's another one today. It's like insults that I've not heard in many a year.
And this isn't sort of tokenism, it is because the brother really being 8, and when David comes back goes forward in time, however, because he's doubled in age, he's now older than David and has morphed into quite a, I suppose, trendy, cool, still with the glasses and an odd mullet, studying some sort of science thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And when they get back to the house, and one of the things that kind of made me a little bit freaked out was because it's the 4th of July, so they're all ready for their fireworks and everything, and this is a very standard Disney middle class family.
Nice house by the marina, got their own boat.
Boy's got a telescope, which he's ogling a young girl, and now I assume she doesn't have supervision or anything, but when the dad walks in and finds the kid looking for this telescope, and he acts as though he's looking at something on his laptop and closes it quickly, just buying him a present. But the dad then looks through the telescope.
That's right.
The girl seems to look back at the telescope, and I don't know how far away she was, but if she looks up and sees a guy, say must be 40 odd.
Yeah, sort of staring her down from the window. It's slightly awkward.
Yeah, that could.
It might not end well.
And his mum was Lambert from Aliens.
So, that's right.
Recurring theme for her. So she's typecast as someone who's she didn't suffer too much at this film, other than having a child stolen. Dangerous, I suppose. So David has to go and pick the brother Jeff or Alan up from some event. And as he's walking through the woods, taking the shortcut, he falls into a ravine. You hear a train go past and falling down. Gets up and
you think that is sort of like a couple of minutes have passed at most. Like I say, he then sort of rubs his head a little bit, climbs up the ravine, across the railway tracks, and then sort of back over to the family house.
Yeah, except it's not the family house.
No,
because as we discover in the now 8 years since this has happened, there's an elderly couple living in there. There's a rather frantic old woman, which I suppose is understandable. The lady opens the door and a 12-year-old yob
bustling in,
bursts in, demanding, probably claiming to be from the gas board or something, steal a life savings.
Exactly.
He runs up to his old room, which turns out to be some sort of den for a wannabe Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, it's like a stonking sort of man cave, isn't it? He's there like the man's in a smoking jacket. He's like got a paper. I think he had like a little thing of whiskey or something next to him on the table. It's a bit of smooth jazz.
Yeah, probably had one of those pipes that was blowing bubbles out of it. But he seemed very suave. He's like, What's the problem, son?
Exactly, very sort of considered in his approach. No, complete opposite to his wife.
Probably heard his wife screaming and thinking,
Not again, not again.
Another kid's bursting. This kid, fair enough. David finds this all very freaky and has a little bit of a breakdown. The one thing that sticks out for me is that this ravine can't have been too far from the house.
No.
David's parents, who've obviously moved and done whatever else, you'd think would tell the police, right, we live here. We sent him off to pick up Alan Carr from this place. Why don't we look at the route that he's taken?
Exactly.
But the thing that I wasn't sure is, was David actually there or not? Because
so is he lying there for 8 years, or has he been taken and then only returned at just the instant before he then wakes up to then clamber out? It's a bit ambiguous, really.
Because I suppose if they did do a search, they'd see him lying there. Maybe his brain would be in space somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Having all these star charts loaded up. I don't know how long it takes, certainly in USA or Florida, to declare someone legally dead, but
they certainly had done so in this in this one, with a sort of rather awkward scene in the police station.
It seems to be a recurring thing in films of that era about missing children. The episode I did earlier on of Big, where the kid goes missing, but he's not really missing, he's just aged 20 years. Now, as David peers out of nowhere or from his ravine, a bumpkin farmer finds a shiny spaceship tied up in his cables, apparently looking at cows.
Which would be a big surprise, really, if you happen to be going about your own business and suddenly finding a huge big spaceship there.
Yeah, I think in these days, perhaps in modern England, he'd have probably wouldn't have called anyone. They'd just try to sell it for scrap.
It'd probably, exactly. It's even that's all live streaming it on Facebook.
Yeah, it'd be on Periscope.
Exactly.
Is that still a thing? So David's taken off. The police have used a very scientific method of getting him to. What year is it? Who's the president? With Jimmy Carter.
It seems like the standard sort of questions in these sort of in these situations.
And again, that was one of the questions from Back to the Future, wasn't it?
It was indeed, yeah.
Who's the president? It must be weird because, again, 8 years have passed. David's parents they've gone to their new house. Again, it seems like it's by water and everything, so they can't spend that much money looking for the kid. But they turn up and I suppose you've got 8 years of aging plus the, I suppose, worry of losing a kid. They do look a lot older.
They've not aged well, I think is probably fair to say.
No. And then the brother, Alan Carr, who's gone through a metamorphosis of his own.
I was going to say, he's developed well, I think. The phrase that I would use.
Yeah, I think he'd most recently been in Teen Wolf, so maybe some of that cool rubbed off him. And the goons from NASA come along and take him off. He's had some testing at the hospital, and
very weird sort of scene that said that he's like broadcasting directly to the equipment with alpha waves and all the rest of it. And then the bit that I didn't understand is that how suddenly from having he sort of projects the image of the spaceship on the screens in the hospital. And then the next thing, it sort of cuts to, at NASA, the sort of like a big printout, big plotter printer. The printout of the ship that he produced is coming out there. It's like the hospital just like ring up. They've got a direct hotline to NASA to say, "Listen, we've got this kid here who's can produce this this spaceship."
It's a premonition, I guess, of sort of modern technology where you can almost imagine, or you're sending things from one device to the other.
Yeah, exactly.
1986, so before the internet. So what's he thinking? Oh, it's coming up on the screen, and let's email it or fax it to
over to NASA. Yeah.
And the weird thing is, I don't know what the time lapse is, that this doctor has seen what looks like a giant walnut pop up on his screen. I think, let's send that to NASA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course, obviously, rigorous medical training has equipped him to come to that decision.
Yeah, because the NASA physician or scientist comes along, and initially he comes across as, I want to explore the truth and why he hasn't aged. And
quite well-meaning, really.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a ruse, isn't it? Really, to sort of get the family to hand David over for a 48-hour period, I think he says, and it's like you just know that it's not going to be 48 hours.
He's a government stooge who'll Yeah, keep him away like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
They take David off to their little base to do these tests, and this is where we establish that David's brain is basically full of maps and star charts and can communicate in what look like wingdings.
Yeah, there's a certain sort of pair of scissors on the screen at one point.
And a Batman logo. And
Exactly.
And he said he'd been away for 2.2 light years.
That's right.
And he had gone to some planet called Phalon and
Yep.
ran off crying as was his wont. But in his sort of NASA prison cell, while they're doing their interrogation of him, he's got TV. He's got all. I was really
in terms
jealous.
of prison cells go, it's quite well appointed, I think.
It's cushy open prisons these days where you get your Transformers toys and music videos.
Exactly.
I don't know what crime he'd committed, but it was. I suppose they're probably doing drugs and all that.
Oh.
You get Sarah Jessica Parker brought to his room. I don't know if that's a punishment or not.
Well, exactly.
And the magic post machine.
Yeah, the lumbering post vehicle, which sort of just bursts into the room, and he's like, going, "What on earth is this?"
I do wonder if this was aimed at a possible. I guess this was around the time we'd had the 3 original Star Wars films and everything else, where robots and droids and this were a big thing. And I wonder if they thought maybe that this machine, was it Ralph?
That's right. Yeah.
Was going to be a recurring character, and he'd have his own story.
Spin-off series or something like that. The Adventures of Ralph.
Yeah, Ron Howard had come in to direct Ralph, a Flight of the Navigator story. And I did put in a rude joke that my wife wouldn't appreciate, but I did say this was probably the only bloke Sarah Jessica Parker didn't try and sleep with, to take her Sex and the City character to a new level. But that's objectifying. I disagree with that comment, and I challenge myself.
Indeed.
Yes. But as part of this sort of interview, it was 560 light years he travelled, and he'd been gone for 2.2 solar hours.
Yeah, which is an equivalent of
4 years.
4 years, there, and then 4 years back to make the 8 years.
Yeah, I don't know what a solar hour is, but
no.
But I suppose it's weird. It's in a way it's fortunate for them that NASA are stupid enough to bring David to the spaceship, and obviously as part of their investigation, they're looking into why is this spaceship here? Why is this boy thinking about this spaceship?
Yeah.
Fantasizing about it. I don't know. And what do you do? It's kind of like the keymaster and the gatekeeper. You don't bring them together.
Exactly.
It's going to cause chaos, because they bring David onto their base, and immediately the spaceship starts communicating.
Yeah, so I was sort of talking to him, really.
Yeah. He goes quite easily.
Yes.
This is very much a compliant boy being groomed.
By the alien overlord, yeah.
By Pee Wee Herman.
Yes, funny that.
Pee Wee Herman under a false name, admittedly. But we meet the spaceship, Max, or Trimaxian, something or other.
Yeah.
And it's voiced by Pee Wee Herman, who is very stiff, and he's kind of like the Terminator in the way,
exactly.
he talks, and everything's affirmative, and instead of saying yes, it's compliance.
Compliance. Compliance. Compliance. Compliance. Compliance. Compliance. Compliance. Compliance. Well, excuse me. Compliance.
Which again, if you put that on, if you talk about Flight of the Navigator on Twitter or Facebook, everyone's compliance.
That is the phrase.
Yeah. But he goes onto this spaceship quite willingly.
Yeah.
I suppose he's still in this confused state where NASA have been interrogating him.
Testing him. And...
Yeah. There's probably an uncut version where he's been waterboarded. Maybe he's on Guantanamo Bay.
Well, Americans for you, that's all I'm saying.
This was the Reagan government. Not Jimmy Carter.
No.
And because the NASA people have been trying to work their way into the spaceship,
and failing, yeah,
very sealed. I'm sure they had some people lined up with machine guns to shoot their way in, because they were very quickly on scene when the space when the door opens.
Yeah, it's a sort of a real difference between how inept they were when he was making his getaway, and that the slowest getaway in sort of movie history, I think, and get past several security guards, and then compared to how quickly they reacted when they did discover that that he actually managed to get into the ship.
Yeah, because they were fairly heavily armed. Now I was under the impression NASA was a science-based organisation.
Obviously not. I've been masquerading that all the time.
The equivalent of the military wing of the Salvation Army. David somehow manages to get onto the spaceship. It opens the door for him, gets on. His first thought is to get away, and this is when the spaceship starts doing all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah, it's almost sort of unnecessary. It's like almost getting to the grips, it's like first driving lesson, really. It's there, sort of like kangarooing the car down the road. It sort of goes straight up 20 miles and come all the way back down again, and then sort of eventually manages to work out to put it into first gear, and then sort of disappears off into the horizon.
Yeah, I still think that when I drive an automatic. Now, one of the key points of the film is that Max, the spaceship, has been around the galaxy or the universe or something, abducting or borrowing other creatures for various experiments, and it's like Jim Henson's workshop where they
exactly. Sort of the door opens, doesn't it? The panel slides open, and suddenly it's sort of all presented there.
Here's the room of freaks. There's the thing that eats his hat. And
oh yeah,
the eye.
Yeah, that eye was freaky. I remember when I was a kid watching it and just being absolutely mortified when that eye came up out of nowhere.
And I don't know what he did to these animals things, because it's not very well explained. Because there was a reason for taking a human, in that it's that often troped line that you only use 10% of your brain.
Yeah.
And I think, looking back at where that's come up in other films, and you've got the John Travolta one where he get a brain tumour, which then gave him like Jedi powers or something like that. And then
there was another one as well a few years back with Scarlett Johansson, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah.
As well, yeah. It's a similar sort of thing.
I remember that film fondly. Yeah, because then she just turned into like black. It was like going into the Matrix. At the end.
Exactly.
Morgan Freeman. I guess we can still talk about him. He's not been found guilty of anything yet. So David had the 90% of his brain filled with maps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is quite interesting because I guess you're looking at maps in a context that, if you look at my phone, for example, takes up a section of space for Google Maps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Other maps are available. I mean, I don't know, did he have these maps still then when he left? Because I assume this 90% of the memory in his brain, it's just lying there dormant. I don't know. It's a little bit weird because as soon as he uploads to Max, which again sounds weird, Max starts talking like a human-ish.
Yeah, and a rather annoying human as well. That sort of instance. Yeah, he sort of almost picked up alongside the maps some other stuff as well.
Yeah, because we found that David's taste in popular culture from 1978 was mostly the Bee Gees and Starsky and Hutch.
Yes.
Now, one of the things we saw earlier was that he'd never seen a music video.
Correct. Yes.
They had like Transformers toys in the room, which I guess he wouldn't know what they were. And what's this plane? What was it? How does it become a robot? I don't know. But I don't know. Were the things like Dude and Cool, or maybe they were, but it was the usual sort of thing where he'd say "cool" and he'd go, "Oh, do you want the air conditioning on?" That sort of dad joke.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, like that sort of forebear of Terminator 2, where to try and make him more human, he's like, no problemo and stuff. Schwarzenegger was slightly better at that than Pee-wee.
Yes, definitely.
So while they're basically travelling the world at this point.
Yeah, sort of the movie sort of turns from that sort of the first half into the second half, which is a bit like a buddy road trip sort of movie, really.
They go off to Tokyo.
Yes.
Well, let's be honest, it wasn't Tokyo. It was a green screen somewhere.
Yeah, or a backlot in one of the movie theatre car park or something.
Yeah, they went down and got a few Japanese people and stereotypically give us some cameras.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not sure you'd do it these days. That's for sure.
Yeah, to be honest, I think the film would probably be half funded by China and.
Yeah, exactly.
But they end up going to back to the United States and taking a sort of slow meander across. I mean, this ship can travel at light years, light speed, whatever, and it takes
however long it took to get from from Tokyo all the way back to Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, and you still have to follow the main road. It was
that's the thing. Despite all the maps that he had, he still couldn't work out how to go to Fort Lauderdale.
I don't know. It's like if you go around parts of London and you think about, that new development's not been uploaded by Google. the bypass down the A4.
Bloody sat nav. Yeah.
You've probably got Swampy in there protesting. And they stop off on the way because they get to Florida and they go to Al's Gator Farm.
Yeah, which is a very weird thing. I actually found out the actor who plays Big Al is called Rusty Pouch.
What a name.
It's sort of like classic American name. But yeah, they sort of stop off there. Sort of David goes sort of round to phone Jeff because he doesn't know where the new house is in Fort Lauderdale, so asks Jeff to give some kind of signal when they're a little bit closer. And then this sort of tourist family sort of like rock up there to like fill up their car full of gas. And then the kids are there sort of playing with the spaceship or so. They're there sort of getting a selfie and all the rest of it. And all this time Big Al's just like staring up at the ship, saying absolutely nothing at all, just absolutely transfixed by it.
Yeah. And this is funny because he does make an E.T. joke because David comes out from the phone box and he just wanted to phone home.
Yeah.
I found out that apparently the land that was filmed on was owned by Burt Reynolds. Now, I don't know if this was just, maybe Burt owed someone a favour.
Exactly.
I don't think he had his own line of gator farms or anything else. Oh, wow, Rusty Pouch.
Yeah, I know. What a name.
That's that sort of Slim Pickens sort of thing, isn't it?
Exactly. Only in America.
God, I wonder if he's still around.
I think he is actually. I had a quick look at this sort of IMDb, and his acting career really didn't get far. He's been doing a lot of stuff behind the camera by all accounts.
Yeah.
So
probably lost a leg to diabetes or an alligator. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
He was a large, sweaty chap.
Yes, very much so.
One sort of subplot that was going along while they were going on their road trip was the NASA. I keep referring to them as goons because... But
they really are good. They seem to be completely inept. So it's like, don't realise things until the very last moment.
Yeah, and they turn up because Sarah Jessica Parker, I can't remember her name, has gone to tell the family what's actually happened.
Yeah.
Because the scientists weren't telling the family. They was like, he's in his room.
Yeah, didn't want to talk to people or something like that. Yeah.
Teenage boys. Then they turn up and basically kidnap her and chuck her in a van.
Yes.
Force the family to watch Jeopardy.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know NASA had these powers.
Clearly do, yeah.
And then any you can imagine after that it'd be can you give that in the form of a question? It's just so strange that you could imagine if it was, I don't know, the FBI or something, but they were NASA officials.
Exactly.
And you expect a NASA official to be Stephen Hawking or some
like a scientist, genius scientist, rather than some inept goons who they're like absolutely transfixed by the episode of TV or so. And, enough to realise that Jeff has got out of the bedroom, found some fireworks, and has climbed up onto the roof and letting fireworks off.
Yeah, it's just poor work. This doesn't reflect well on law enforcement in any way.
No, exactly. But NASA definitely need to sort of go and review their recruitment policy. Yeah. Definitely.
And during this, because obviously David wants to go home, and it's difficult because obviously NASA realise and they'll probably have some off-book Area 51 style rules where they can just kidnap people and
they're never seen again. Yeah.
And he just wants to go back to his family.
Yeah.
All the time he's talking to Max about why he wants to go back. When he does eventually get back to the house because of Jeff's fireworks, he says, it is my family, but it's not my home.
Yeah.
Because essentially he's still 12 when he should be 20.
Yeah, he sort of talks about, he can't wait till he tells his friends all about it. Yeah. He goes, all my friends are now 20.
And Max's explanation was kind of, your human brain's so delicate.
Yeah, so fragile and delicate that you're not going to be able to survive it.
Not fragile enough for me to shove a load of crap in there.
Yeah, exactly. Use it as some kind of USB stick.
I just plugged you in, but I got you the wrong way around. They're going back, and I think David ultimately takes a bit of responsibility, saying, "Look, well, I know I might die, but it's worth the risk."
Yeah.
It's his equivalent of the lightning strike in the clock tower.
Exactly.
And things, because then it becomes just a time travel bit.
Yeah, and it's always the thing that seems in sort of time travel movies that when an object is travelling through time, they seem to go through it's lots of like lightning and rumbles of thunder and stuff. It always seems to be that sort of wormhole thing that they go through.
Yeah, I mean, I would just imagine, and again, this isn't any science or anything else. I've already had a long discussion with my wife this evening. We watched a documentary. I'm probably giving this an awful date thing. It's not very general, but there's a documentary about science and medicine on the telly.
Okay.
And I was arguing about science because I didn't agree with this test.
Sure.
Now, I'm not a scientist. I did really not very well in my GCSEs. My wife has a master's. She's an MSc. She's done all these research projects and everything else. And I think I came across a little bit Brexity. And my arguments were, it's bollocks, isn't it? That's not going to work. And yet, I think in this time travel thing, I'm sure it would just be 1 second it's this, 1 second it's that. There's no flashy Tron-style graphics. But there was the graphics, the lightning, the montage of sort of flashing quickly from boy to ship to fire, whatever. And he wakes up in the ravine again.
Indeed. Trains rattling past and...
Yeah. Goes back because it's still July the 4th. He's only been missing, I presume, then a few minutes.
Yeah.
Goes back, meets his mum, dad, Alan, on the boat, and it appears he's smuggled one of these odd creatures.
Yeah, Puck Marin, I think it's called.
Yeah.
That's sort of like a bat-like creature. He's managed to sort of stash it away in his bag, and it sort of lives to fight another day on Earth.
Because funnily enough, Max had already talked about this Puck Marin as saying, I was going to take him home, but his world had been destroyed by something out of... He was the only survivor of Alderaan. Maybe he's the Princess Leia of the whole thing. Maybe they're related.
You never know.
Yeah, as long as they don't kiss. But yeah, so that's him, and he has a newfound love and respect for his family and everything else. And that's the end of the film. It's not the end of the story, though.
No.
The actor who played David... now, we've both done some research, and I can see from looking across the table... You've done a lot more than I have.
I have indeed, yes.
Tell us the tragedy of Joey Kramer.
I will do. So his acting career sort of came to end in the late 90s. And I think it's fair to say he's had a turbulent personal life. There's been a number of arrests. He was working in a sports shop for a period of time. He's prosecuted for drug offences. And then most recently, back in 2016... was jailed for 2 years for taking part in an armed robbery. And that is unbelievable as it seems. And watching some footage of it, you know that when a news story starts, former child star, it's not going to be, makes a glorious return to acting. It's going to be, is involved in a armed robbery. But actually, I was, from looking at it today, that he's been released early. There's actually a documentary that's being made about him called Life After the Navigator, which apparently is coming out next year. But yeah, it sort of looks at the film and then sort of talks about his personal life since then. So yes.
Now the bank robbery itself was a comedy of its own.
Very much so.
It was almost like watching Dog Day Afternoon or something like that, because this wasn't just a normal bank robbery.
No.
Now, he already had previous for the drugs and the guns and check forgery and everything else. But this bank robbery, he wore a disguise and yet was still recognised from his mediocre
acting
career. So I don't know if they I don't know if they recognised him from Flight of the Navigator or
something else that he might have done.
The American equivalent of being Shoplifter 2 from the film. But yeah, that copped him 2 years of jail.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And I remember when the story broke, and he looked so different. I suppose that's a combination of age and
a hard lifestyle, yeah.
I think he was using that 90% of his brain for something else. Chasing dragons and so forth.
Exactly.
It was just hilarious to see this sweet kid who basically voice of a dormouse initially at the beginning of the film turn out to be a fairly serious criminal.
Like you say, in terms of the league of crime and offending, armed robbery is it is up there, isn't it? Definitely up there.
Except it wasn't exactly the finest, but this was a bank robbery committed by someone who takes a lot of drugs.
Yes, we're not talking like Ocean's 11 here in terms of sort of slickness with the.
This wasn't the Joker from The Dark Knight. It was pure stupidity.
Exactly.
I'm surprised he didn't shoot himself.
Add insult to injury, yeah.
Now, one thing I did note when we talked about this the first time round was they're all talking about a remake of this film.
Yes, and I think that's an interesting perspective in terms of whether it's going to be still set in the 1978, 1986, or they're going to do it to sort of modern day. And it got me thinking, actually, would it be as much of a culture shock if you were to, fall into a ravine in 2010 and wake up in 2018 in terms of, I was having a look and seeing what like technological developments and stuff were in like the last 8 years. And it's stuff like iPads, like your virtual assistants, that sort of thing. If you look back between sort of 1978 and 86, you got things like mobile phone, games consoles, CDs, Sony Walkman, music videos and MTV. So it's a huge big culture shock for there. So it'd be interesting to see where they pitch it.
Yeah. I mean, I find it strange if they went back to that time, purely because, again, and this is something you could ask of most remakes, why bother?
Yes.
But I can imagine that if they did it from 2010 to 2018, it would be, my God, your iPhone software looks so different.
yeah. Has your clock changed font? Yeah.
And things where you're still using a PlayStation 3. What? You're not using... Where's your Alexa? Where's your Amazon Dot?
Yeah.
You mean you've got to go to the takeaway to order food?
What type of humanity is this? Yeah.
What is Uber? This is the thing I find, and I'd hope, maybe they'd have to think you'd have to put it over a wider scale, because 8 years now, I guess this is the point of science, is we're always finding new things, but 8 years really isn't a long time.
No.
Because behind the scenes, I'm sure a lot's going on, but our lives aren't drastically different. I mean, we have smart TVs and we have Netflix instead of Love Film. Mm-hmm. We get our films on demand rather than DVD.
Yeah. But on the grand scheme of things, it's very, very similar to
things
how it was.
Things aren't drastically different. I couldn't even tell you what the music is. I don't know what's number one at the moment. I barely knew what was number one in 2010. And this is, I suppose, something they might have to think where, we're already at the point where people are probably learning about Britpop in history class.
Oh, God. Yeah, that makes me feel old, yeah.
And there's a documentary series on CNN at the moment called, and they do one about every decade, and they're on the 90s at the moment. And it's bad because having watched, the 60s and the 70s, and then the 80s where you kind of remember bits of it.
Yeah.
And now you watch the 90s thinking, and this is a documentary about the past. And it's a and this is talking about Friends and the internet and music and talking about Nirvana and this, and it's just sitting there going, oh my God.
That sort of dawning realisation, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, maybe they could make it so it was from, I don't know, the mid-90s to now. And even then, we think the fashions changed drastically and, I don't know, cars, maybe. Why is the car not making any noise?
Yeah, exactly.
What is this Prius? I think that would be an interesting one, but you'd also think, and don't think about who'd play the future criminal mastermind, because they'll probably pluck someone out of the Disney conveyor belt. But
exactly.
If you were to think of someone who'd be the voice of Max, and I'm not trying to think of Pee Wee Herman's current equivalent, because then we'd be going down the U tree. Cosby or something like that.
Exactly.
Do you think there's anyone who could I suppose American, who would pull that off with maybe even a more memorable performance?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah,
There's something trying to think about. It's where we've talked about it in other films, and a recent example was talking about who would play Skeletor in the Masters of the Universe remake. And
yeah.
it ended up we boiled it down to Alexander Armstrong and Richard Osman.
Yeah, I can actually see that. Yeah,
And then Harvey Keitel, because as TV has proved, he'll do anything for money. But I was thinking it would probably end up being someone like Seth Rogen or something like that. It would be that sort of distinctive enough voice.
Exactly.
But it's an interesting one. Maybe they could make it really retro and everyone in the voice of Bart Simpson or something.
Jack Black, maybe. I suppose that would be quite a good, sort of quite a distinctive sort of vocal performance.
Yeah, and someone who I suppose he from School of Rock and everything would appeal to that market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I quite like to see that. But I do wonder about these remakes and this. I mean, this was, I suppose, almost your stereotypical cult film. It wasn't, certainly in this country anyway, it wasn't a huge, roaring, breakout success.
No, I mean, I think I had a look and it was like the 48th highest grossing film that year, I think it was.
Yeah.
Not troubling the box office records.
So I suppose if you break that down, it probably did well for 1 week, and then
and that was about it.
But then a lot of people, I suppose, is the joy of it having 30 years to age and mature like a vintage wine. It's been on TV and everyone seems to remember it.
Exactly.
Everyone's seen it. And I remember when it first came out on video, and my mum took me and my brother to the video shop, and she said, "Oh, this is new. This is space shit."
You'll enjoy it. It'll be good. Yeah.
And we were still into Transformers and Star Wars and stuff, and thinking, "Oh God, this will be awful," and really enjoyed it because part of a kid's idea of fun is to go off in a spaceship and.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what kid wouldn't want to? Let's say go meet an alien, a friendly alien. Got a bit of a trip like that. Yeah, it appeals to it really appeals to kids.
Yeah, winding this one up, it's been good fun, and I do wonder, maybe they could take it forward, and if Disney were to branch out and chuck it into a different pot that they own and make it a more adult flavoured theme. Maybe they could have a Kiefer Sutherland voiced Max or something like that.
Yeah.
It'd probably end up being Liam Neeson, and Max would turn into a revenge.
Certain set of skills, yeah.
The Puck Marine could go on a rampage. And he blew up my planet.
Seeking his revenge.
And we know who'd play the younger brother. He's available. He's on Channel 4.
Yep. Sign him up. Disney, sign him up.
He's a chatty man. Anyway, Ian, it was a pleasure to talk about the film again.
Likewise.
Now, you've got an account on Instagram which is looking at a slightly different topic to this, but it's about sort of architecture and buildings and stuff.
I have indeed, yeah. So underscore buildings, etc. on Instagram, sort of indulging my passion for architecture, photography and structures, and sort of documenting my travels both in the UK and abroad with interesting things that I come about. So check it out.
Any spaceships on there?
No, there's a weird object on the quay in North Tyneside, but not quite a spaceship.
Yeah, maybe that can be one of your photo a day challenge.
Indeed.
Yeah. Is that on Instagram as well?
That is indeed. That's super_Cali if you want to follow my 365-day photo challenge.
Yeah. Okay, well, as per usual, we'll wind this up, play it out with the song that was #1 in the UK at the time of the film's release. Now, unfortunately, when this came out in 1986, it wasn't around the time that Spitting Image was #1. It wasn't Wham, it wasn't Madonna, it wasn't Nick Berry. It was Boris Gardner with I Want to Wake Up With You. So, Ian, thanks very much for joining us, and I'll see you for the next episode.
I want to wake up with you. I want to be there when you open your eyes. I want you to be the first thing that I see. I want to wake up with you.
This podcast is part of Brit Pod Scene, an independent network of uniquely British podcasts that's always growing. Check out BritPodScene.com or BritPodScene on Twitter to find out more.